I'd say I'm one of the early pioneers of virtual and augmented reality. I started over 30 years ago in labs at Stanford and NASA and the U.S. Air Force, and then I founded a number of companies in the space: virtual reality, augmented reality, and artificial intelligence companies. I see two primary forms of advertising emerge. One that I refer to as virtual product placements, and the other that I would refer to as virtual spokespeople. The final and probably most persuasive form of advertising in the metaverse will be a promotional conversation where an avatar engages you in conversation. They start to ask you, hey, what kind of car do you drive? How do you like it? Have you heard about this car? And it can be a very persuasive form of advertising because it's drawing you in, but also because these large technology platforms will have access to personal data about you. So the conversation will be custom crafted based on your interests and your background and your previous purchases. And that again becomes dangerous. It can become manipulative. If an AI can, beat the world's best chess player or the world's best Go player or poker player, like what's the chance a consumer has if you're engaged with this virtual spokesperson that has a history of your interests and likes and is reading your emotions? It will be able to manipulate you to buy things that you don't need or believe things that aren't true. I grew up dyslexic, which I think is which most people don't know, and I actually think it was actually a helpful thing for me. Not at the time, but as just adapting to seeing information in a slightly different way is, I think, one of the things that made me really interested in human perception and these other environments like virtual reality and augmented reality.
Hello, fellows. Welcome to the next episode of Jagged with Jasravee. Subscribe to my channel for conversations at the edge with thought leaders from the branding, marketing, and the business world. Conversations that ignite new ideas with rough and sharp edges. Hi, Dr. Louis. So nice to have you on my show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, so if I requested you to tweet your profile, what would you say?
Sure. So I'd say I'm one of the early pioneers of virtual and augmented reality. I started over 30 years ago in labs at Stanford and NASA and the U.S. Air Force. And then I founded a number of companies in the space: virtual reality, augmented reality, and artificial intelligence companies. And I also write often about the metaverse for major publications.
I mean, it's unbelievable, Louis. When I'm reading about what you've written, how you write about complex concepts, making them so simple and easy to understand with analogies and examples. I'm very curious to know what fascinated you that you moved in this direction like 30 years back. What really happened?
My interest has always been how to use technology to enhance how people interact and how people perform. And so 30 years ago, it was like 1991 that I started working at NASA and Stanford in virtual reality. And I went in that direction because I saw the potential to present information to people in the ways that we were meant to perceive it. We tend to forget that most of the information we have access to in computers is flat content, and we are restricted to being outsiders looking in at this flat content. Now it's largely mobile content. So you have people walking down the street, staring down at phones in their hands, and then we think, like, is that the natural way people should interact with information? And the thing that attracted me to virtual reality and augmented reality was the potential to take information and put it out into the real world, put it out into three-dimensional space, the way that we were meant to perceive information, to have content seamlessly integrated into our daily experiences. And And so I really do believe that that is, ultimately the best way for us to access information. At the same time, I think it raises a number of technical issues and just dangers for people. And so it's not all good, but I feel like if it's regulated, it can be, but it is. I think it is the natural progression of how we interact with the digital world.
Right. So, Dr. Louis, in that context, if you had to define metaverse, and like you were saying, it's the most natural way to consume information. And in that context, you have said it's a very humanizing technology. I think you would be the only person who's saying that, or the people, like, because you've thrown a fresh light at how to look at this. So, for the uninitiated as well, if you had to define and explain what is metaverse, how would you go about it?
Yeah, so I would say the metaverse is this societal transition that's happening from a world that's based on flat media that's viewed in the third person to a world that's mostly immersive media that's experienced in the first person. And I like to break it up into two different categories: virtual metaverse and the augmented metaverse, where the virtual metaverse is when you, the user, are immersed in a fully simulated world. Other users are there too as avatars. Information is there in spatially presented. The augmented metaverse is instead when you are in the real world with augmented reality glasses or other eyewear, and you're embellishing and enhancing the real world with virtual content. And both of these are pretty significant changes because they fundamentally change the role of the user. They change the role of the user from an outsider looking in at content to a participant experiencing content. And I think that will change all industries, all markets, everything from medicine and engineering to how the marketing industry works.
Yes, yes. And in that context, you say this is a fundamental shift. And of course, you're saying this is the transition, this is the next step. But when you say it's a fundamental shift for marketing, what do you mean? And also, when you say that metaverse is natural, personal, and intuitive, because it's an experience in the first person, like you were saying, and it's immersive. So, marketing in metaverse, how is this a fundamental shift?
Yeah, so right now, most, especially online marketing, but even print marketing, is primarily flat documents, flat videos, flat advertisements on television. It's basically text, images, and video, and you, the consumer, are the observer. As the world transitions from this world of flat media to immersive media, just like all other aspects of industry, marketing is now going to transition to immersive experiences, and so you will be present in immersive environments, the virtual world or the augmented world. And marketing is not going to be a flat advertisement that pops up in space. I mean, some of it will be, and especially at first. But what marketeers will realize is that it is more impactful to place content immersively in your world. And I see two primary forms of advertising emerge. One that I refer to as virtual product placements, and the other that I would refer to as virtual spokespeople. And so we could talk about each. A virtual product placement is what it sounds like. If I'm in a virtual world or an augmented world, instead of having an advertisement that pops up or a video telling me about a new car or a new product, I might just see the new car drive by. I might walk by and see a product in my environment. I might see people using the product. I might see people having an activity that involves the product. So virtual product placement can be, a product, a service, an activity that is injected into the virtual world on behalf of a sponsor to influence people, and it will be targeted, just like advertisements are targeted in social media. And that's important to realize, because it means that when I'm walking down the street and I see a particular parked car of a particular product, I might assume everybody is seeing that, but it won't be that way. I will see things that are different than other people see, and so we will live in this customized world. And there's lots of dangers that raises, we could talk about later. But ultimately, this notion of virtual product placements can be a very powerful form of advertising, because people will subconsciously see things in their world. And again, it could be in a fully virtual world, or it can be in an augmented world, the real world. You're walking down a real street in a real city, and you see a virtual person walk by drinking a virtual can of a particular sports drink, and you think, oh, and it might just subconsciously just notice it. You're not thinking of it as an advertisement. You subconsciously notice it, and it is a very powerful form of marketing. Now, I might keep walking down that same street and see another person walking by with that same drink, and I might start thinking, wow, that is really a popular drink around here. And I might not realize, no, I was targeted by that particular sponsor. And again, you could easily see how that's both effective and also somewhat manipulative. And so I'm a proponent of putting guardrails in place so that people are not subject to predatory advertising in that way. And one of the most obvious guardrails would be to make sure that these virtual product placements look different than authentic things in the world, so that at least I can tell the difference. I know, okay, that's an advertisement, and that's just another person in the metaverse that's actually really drinking that soft drink. And being able to see the difference, it at least makes consumers aware. Now, this gets even more important when we talk about the next category, which was virtual spokespeople. And so, in the metaverse, people have seen avatars. People interact as avatars. These avatars are getting more and more realistic, and within 5 to 10 years, they'll be photorealistic. They'll look like real people, and advertisers will have AI controlled avatars that have a promotional agenda, that are going to engage you in promotional conversation to sell you something. And so, and it can happen in two different ways. One would be passive and one would be active. So passive would be, okay, I'm walking down the street and I see that parked car, and then there are two people standing in front of it talking about that car, right? Talking about how great, they just bought this new car and how great it is. And I might think that those are just other users in the metaverse, and not realize, no, those are virtual spokespeople placed into this world for me to observe. And just overhear. I might overhear them as I'm walking by. I might overhear them, in a virtual elevator. I might So you get the idea. Or they could actually engage me in conversation. And so the final and probably most persuasive form of advertising in the metaverse will be promotional conversation, where an avatar engages you in conversation. They start to ask you, what kind of car do you drive? How do you like it? Have you heard about this car? And it can be a very persuasive form of advertising, because it's drawing you in, but also because these large technology platforms will have access to personal data about you. So the conversation will be custom crafted based on your interests and your background and your previous purchases. And that, again, becomes dangerous. It can become manipulative. And the last piece of this is that in the metaverse, platforms will be tracking so many different things about what you do. They'll track where you are and where you go, but they can also be looking at your facial expressions and your vocal inflections. And so if you are engaging this virtual spokesperson, and it's detecting your emotions from your face and your voice and your posture, it could adjust its tactics in real time to persuade you. And again, that's a place where I think there should be regulations in place that prevent metaverse platforms from selling advertisements that are using personal data and using your emotional data to adjust in real time to influence you. It's I understand why advertisers want to do it, but the way I look at it is, if an AI can, beat the world's best chess player or the world's best Go player or poker player, like what's the chance a consumer has if you're engaged with this virtual spokesperson that has a history of, your interests and likes and is reading your emotions? It will be able to manipulate you to buy things that you don't need or believe things that aren't true. And so it really does require regulations and policies and guardrails to protect consumers.
This is mind-blowing. I mean, I'm just imagining this as you're saying, and I mean, word of mouth and, conversations and reviews. I mean, all that is like another level, and this is like another level. Because again, like you said, in the VPP also, and you have coined these two terms of how to categorize marketing in the metaverse. So, I mean, you are sitting duck. And the experience of listening from other people, and again, your guards can be down because you think it's people talking about it, and having no idea. But also it makes me feel that very soon, when people realize this is how it is, the trust deficit that already exists can also move up, because you'll be so guarded. I mean, even if a genuine conversation is happening, you're like, oh, there's an agenda and they know all about me, and they're saying because they're trying to manipulate me. And the sooner the marketers put the guardrails, the better it is, because then they don't have to pass that, I shouldn't call it milestone, but that obstacle that is very natural to happen, because the trust deficit is already there so much.
So it's a great point. And it's one of the reasons why I personally think that regulation is good for the industry. It's good for the platforms. It's good for the marketing industry, because without regulation, there will be this large distrust, because you won't be able to trust what you see and hear and experience in the metaverse. You won't be able to tell the difference between what's authentic and what's been placed there in a targeted way for you to experience, for you to come across. And we've seen what happened in social media with the loss of trust, and it's hurt these big brands. It's hurt advertising in social media. It's created all kinds of problems where it spreads disinformation and polarizes populations, because people are being tracked and profiled and targeted, and they don't even know when they're being targeted and when something is actually authentic content. And in the metaverse, same things will happen, but they will happen in even more hidden ways, because the whole point of virtual reality and augmented reality is to fool the senses. It's to blur the boundaries between what's real and what's fake. And if marketeers can use that to their advantage, it will, like you said, create this even larger trust deficit, and that could taint the industry, taint the entire space, just like it has in social media. And when I talk to regulators and government officials, and I say, hey, you need to really think about regulating the metaverse, they'll say, well, we still don't even know how to regulate social media. And my response to them is, yeah, because you waited 10 years too long to try to regulate social media. And so you can't, because the large platforms already built up their business models around tracking and profiling and targeting users. If you regulate the metaverse now, then the business models that evolve will be different. These large companies won't rely on tracking and targeting users. They will have different ways of generating revenue, and they won't end up in an arms race with other large companies to see who can be the best at creating the most manipulative ads in the metaverse. If we tell big companies, no, you can't use, one of the things that, in addition to facial recognition and voice, in the metaverse, they'll very likely will be tracking vital signs, blood pressure, respiration rate, heart rate, and smartwatches already do this.
All biometrics.
But in the metaverse, it'll actually be earbuds and headsets that track blood pressure, respiration, and they're going to use that to sense your emotion. If you are a customer and you're interacting with an advertisement that's reading your blood pressure and adjusting in real time, do you feel like that's predatory? You probably do. You probably have a bad impression of the metaverse. But if there aren't regulations in place preventing that, then as soon as the first company starts doing it and showing how successful it is at making advertisements that are persuasive, then the other companies will have to match, and they will be competing with each other to become who's the best at using blood pressure and respiration to persuade people in the metaverse. But guardrails early on, before these business models have evolved, can allow the metaverse companies to focus on selling, creating the best immersive experiences for customers. And I think that's probably what they want to compete on. And so I honestly believe that regulation and policies that put guardrails in place would be good for even the largest corporations that are building metaverse platforms.
Yeah, I mean, the argument cannot be more persuasive than that, Dr. Louis. And like whatever you talked about, it being predatory and intrusive and exploitative, I mean, that as a human being, you really worry because, I mean, nothing can be worse than that when you're interacting with another person that you don't know you're being manipulated. And you have no idea, you're totally believing, and you have no idea that this is all planted. And it's like I'm thinking of so many science fiction movies. I'm thinking, it's such a different yet powerful experience, and it would have that powerful, repulsive impact also. Once consumers realize. It's like living with an agent, You have no idea that the intentions were never genuine and they were, acting and playing a role. I mean, it can be traumatic.
I don't believe that these metaverse platforms are evil or want to create these exploitive practices. I feel like they will be forced into it if there aren't regulations and they have to compete with other companies. But if it's not regulated, what that really means is that these large platforms that have hundreds of millions or billions of users will be able to see in real time what everybody's doing. So, and then adjust the world around them to persuade them on behalf of a paying advertiser. Like, that's an extreme power. That's a power that's never existed. And it is so extreme because in order to create these immersive worlds, whether it's a virtual world or an augmented world, the platform needs to know where you are, what direction you're standing, what direction you're looking, how long your gaze is lingering as you look at different things. It has to know who you're with. It will be tracking your gait, your posture, your gestures. It will know everything. And in the augmented metaverse, where you're wearing eyewear, they'll be tracking these things in the real world. When you're at home, when you're at work, when you're shopping, when you're out with friends, they will know who you're with and what you're doing. When you're walking down the street, they'll know what windows you slow down and look in. They'll know what you're looking at in those windows. They will know all of this information, and they'll be able to create profiles of people so that they can predict what you're going to do next. If it's regulated, we could say, okay, they need this information, but we can restrict it so that they can't store it, they can't profile people, and then they can't use it to then create these persuasive advertisements. It's this balance, because some of the features that have legitimate uses, like, for example, tracking your blood pressure and your heart rate. If you're doing exercise in the metaverse, if you're using a health application in the metaverse, blood pressure, heart rate, respiration rate, really useful. But there should be rules that say, well, you can't use that for advertising. I can't use your blood pressure and your heart rate to adjust advertisements in real time to make them optimally persuasive. So it's there are all these dangers, but it also isn't that hard to put guardrails in that say, let's push the industry towards a metaverse that can really focus on the positive things, because it can be this amazing creative experience. That person walking down the street in the metaverse with AR glasses on will be able to see amazing artistic content that's generated by developers. It will embellish the world with artistic and creative content. It will embellish the world with informational content. You could be walking and look at a tree and wonder, what kind of tree it is, and that could pop up and you could see information about it. So the potential to create all these really positive things is great. That's why people are working in this space. And so if we can protect against the negative applications, it will be good for the industry, it will be good for consumers, it will be good for developers, and it will even be good for advertisers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you talked about blood pressure and all. Dr. Louis, medicine and the metaverse. What is the potential there? What is already happening there? What would you say?
Yeah, so I say that there's really great potential in the medical field. There's really two parts of it. One is medical training and planning, and the other is medical practice and clinical practice. Medical training is something that I actually have been involved in going back to the early 90s, where some of the first virtual reality systems that I developed were medical simulators for teaching doctors to perform surgical procedures in virtual reality, on realistic looking patients that look and actually feel real, but are completely safe to practice. And just like a pilot can practice on a flight simulator rather than taking up a huge aircraft, surgeons and medical professionals can practice in virtual reality simulators. Over the last 20 years, these simulators have gotten better and better and better, to the point where practicing in a simulator can be not just as good as practicing on a real patient, but actually better, because these simulators can track what you're doing and tell the doctors who are training, how they could perform better. And so all of the benefits of computer technology actually can help. So on the medical training side, I think it's already really valuable, and it will continue to get more and more valuable. On the medical practice side, it's augmented reality that I think is the most interesting, because again, augmented reality, we normally think of it as you wear these glasses and you can see simple information around you. For doctors, there are already systems that are being developed and tested that allow doctors to basically peer inside their patient with these glasses. And so if you think of the world of radiology, where you would take a 3D image, a CAT scan, an MRI of a patient, and you'll use that as a doctor to see basically see what's going on inside the patient, look at trauma, look at disease, plan a procedure. Well, that's an amazing technology. But right now, what doctors do is they look at a flat screen, they see this 3D image, they look back at the patient, they see the patient, they're trying to then mentally imagine, well, where is that tumor inside that patient? Where is that injury inside that patient? With augmented reality, doctors can now wear a headset and basically just see the image projected in the patient, perfectly registered to their body. So they can actually basically have X-ray vision. They can peer inside the body, see the MRI image, and you can have multiple doctors, a whole surgical team standing around a patient, all looking in at the body from different directions. And so they can plan a procedure together. They can point and say, okay, we're going to go and do this and do that. And they can all see the patient and the X-ray. And so it's right now it's already being tested in surgical environments. It uses some higher end hardware that costs a couple $1,000s for the headset, which is still relatively inexpensive for the medical field. The Microsoft HoloLens is the hardware that's most often used for that, and it's I think it's going to then migrate to just from these surgical environments to general practitioners in their office.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Louis, as you were talking, forgive me for using such popular culture references, but I was remembering the Good Doctor series, and how many mistakes got made because the estimation of the problem would go wrong, because you are looking at a two-dimensional image, and the organ is three-dimensional, and the whole planning that can go into saving lives, it's amazing. And marketing as well, for health brands. Do you think that is a specific it's going to be an asset for health brands? And I don't just mean fast moving health goods, but yeah,
for all aspects of the health industry, virtual reality actually has a lot of potential, because it can. And I just had an experience like this in Los Angeles last week, where I went to visit a company called Dreamscape Immersive, where they've created these really amazing virtual reality experiences where they can actually bring you into the body. They can have you experience what is it like to be inside the body, what's it like to be inside of a blood vessel, what's it like to see. And so if you were trying to educate patients about a procedure, or about what a particular drug could do, or what exercise could do, or what it's one thing to tell them. It's another thing to allow them to put on a virtual reality headset and travel inside the body and see visually, what does that drug do? What does exercise do to your cardiovascular system? And so giving people these different perspectives, allowing them to see, to really see the biology, is, I think, a really interesting way to help patients and doctors see the world in the same way, because the patients don't have the medical training, but they can be given these perspectives that they don't have. Wow, that's so awesome. That's so empowering, life-changing, transformative. It could be a transformative experience for a patient to really know what's going on. So, Dr. Louis, one of your article talked about creating a digital copy of a human mind and uploading it. What is that really? Yeah, so that's something that I'm personally very skeptical about, in terms of, there's been a lot of popular culture references of what people call mind uploading, where the idea is that you could copy somebody's mind and put it in a computer system. And the idea, the basic idea, has scientific merit, which is that your brain is a connection of neurons. It's there's 100 billion neurons, so it's very, very dense. Each of the neurons is connected to thousands of others, so it's like 100 trillion connections. It's unbelievably complicated, but the theory goes, if you could scan a brain and simulate down to every single connection, these hundreds of trillions of connections, you could then upload somebody's brain to a computer. They're not just they're all their memories, their personality, everything. And and so there are futurists who talk about how they'll be able to make people immortal by doing this. And so you probably saw a recent article I wrote that said, yeah, like technically that's possible, but it wouldn't make people immortal. You're just making a copy of that person. It would be a duplicate inside of a computer system, but you would still exist and you would still feel like yourself, and that copy would also feel like it's you. And so it has taken on this idea of mind uploading, has kind of taken on this presence in popular culture as this pathway to human immortality, but it really isn't. It really isn't that. And so I had written a few articles recently that say, hey, this is not what people say it is. Even though there are startups and other companies that are pushing this. In fact, there's an industry called the quote digital afterlife that startups are trying to sell people on these future capabilities, and so I think it is another place where consumers will get deceived and exploited.
Yeah. Okay. So, any other emerging trends relating to future of media would you like to talk about in the age of metaverse, creator economy, gaming?
I mean, I do think that the idea of enabling people to interact with information in natural ways is potentially a humanizing technology. I know that there's you can also look at it as taking people away from the real world, and I do worry about that. I mean, I worry about one of my big concerns about virtual reality when people are in fully immersive worlds is that you are separated from the real world. You're cut off from the real world, and that's why I'm a really much bigger proponent of augmented reality, which keeps the real world, keeps face-to-face interactions, keeps real interactions. It just embellishes the world with digital content that's presented in natural ways and can be creative and artistic and informative. And so when you ask about like the trends, people often ask, well, will this how quickly will the metaverse happen? Will it really happen? Will it take off? I think that the virtual metaverse, which is people wearing these headsets in purely virtual worlds, it will get continually more and more popular. But I do think it's going to be restricted to small numbers of hours a day that people engage in those environments, because I don't think people like to be cut off from the real world. And so it will be useful for gaming, for entertainment, for socializing, shopping, small hours a day. I do think that, on the other hand, that augmented reality, which is will be glasses, ultimately will be contact lenses, will be natural and intuitive enough that people will feel like that is a valuable thing to really make as part of their life. And again, I know that it sounds like it's bringing technology more into your life, but right now people carry a phone around with them all day. From the minute they wake up to the minute they go to sleep, they have a phone. That phone is in their pocket, that phone is in their hand, and then they're staring down at a screen all day because they and so we've already made that transition. People are staring down at screens all day as it is. And so I think augmented reality will get people to look back up at the world, and that information will be all around you. And so it is. I do think that's the direction it's going. I think that it will happen soon. I would expect that by 2025, we'll see augmented reality glasses, consumer products from Apple, from Google, from Samsung, probably from Sony, from Snap, from maybe from Microsoft as well. And so I think that the phone that's in your pocket is going to evolve into eyewear that starts out as glasses, becomes contact lenses, and you won't be thinking about holding something and looking down at a screen all day.
That's a very exciting premise. And I also loved how you put it in perspective that human beings don't want to feel cut off from the real world, and connection would stay as important as having these other novel, exotic, artistic, creative experiences. So now there's one more thing which you've written, and this is very useful. And I'd make sure that my 15-year-old son listens to this part definitely, which is, how is social media making us stupid, and how do we fix it?
Yeah, so I mean, the issues here are somewhat, similar to things we talked about in the metaverse, which is, the most dangerous things about the metaverse is that platforms can track people and then manipulate the world without you knowing. And the same thing happens in social media. Right now, social media platforms track where people click and profile their interests, and then social media starts feeding information that they believe will maximize their attention, and so it feeds information that that creates this distorted reality. It's not, you're not getting a perspective of what all the information is. You're getting a perspective just of information that the social media companies think will cause you to spend the most time on their platform. And that's giving people distorted sense of reality. You might think that if you're, for example, just happen to click on something about plane crashes, right? And you get some information about it, and maybe you click again, you could very quickly feel like, oh, planes are crashing all the time, because that's the only information you're being fed. And so it's giving you this distorted sense of reality. It becomes particularly dangerous when these issues are political, because it's breaking the populations up into different groups and putting people into these information bubbles. And so it's really dangerous. To me, the solution is to allow people, when you get a piece of information, to get some context about how prevalent is this information really. If I'm looking at something that's a conspiracy theory about something, do I think, oh, everybody's reading this? Well, if I could click on it and see, no, it's only being targeted at this particular group that I happen to be put into, I can now have context. I could now know, okay, this particular group is not representative of what everybody believes. This conspiracy theory is not something that the whole world believes. And so again, it's about transparency and giving people the ability and the right to know when somebody else is pulling the strings behind the scenes.
So there is something that we do. So, Dr. Louis, our audiences would like to know you a little bit more. So we have a small rapid fire section. Mother's best advice.
Mother's look both ways when you cross the street.
Lovely. What would you do on Mars for fun?
So I think Mars has slightly less gravity than Earth. I could be wrong, but I think running and jumping on Mars would be really interesting, really fun. It'd be even more fun on the moon that has even less.
Nice visual you've given us. Okay. One thing no one knows about you.
I don't know. Not many people know. I grew up dyslexic, which I think is which most people don't know. And I actually think it was actually a helpful thing for me. Not at the time, but as just adapting to seeing information in a slightly different way is, I think, one of the things that made me really interested in human perception and these other environments like virtual reality and augmented reality.
Right. A book you'd like to gift to all your friends.
An amazing book called Ishmael, which I recently read. It's written from the perspective of an ape. And he looks at humanity from the perspective of an outsider looking at humanity and the bad decisions that we make. I think it was written 20 or 30 years ago, but it's really I was surprised.
Wow, that's deep and that's very interesting. Okay, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
I would tell my 18-year-old self that things always move slower than you think they're going to move. And I say that because when I was 18 is actually when I really started thinking about things like virtual reality and augmented reality. And I founded my first virtual reality company when I was, I think, 23. And I really thought that within 10 years, and this was like 1992, I think within 10 years, it would be everywhere. And it took, 3 times longer than that. I think we're now in 2022, we're where I thought we'd be in 2000. But things take longer than you think, and then they suddenly happen really fast. So it's one of these things where
awesome. And it's like life has been preparing you, because when it will happen, it will be really fast. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, what's something new happening in your life right now?
Both of my kids have left the home. They're out in the world in college, and so that's different. You're not having kids at home. Definitely a different experience.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your favorite childhood memory?
I grew up in New York, and I grew up at a time in a suburb of New York, and I grew up at a time when kids had more freedom, I think, than they do now, at least in the U.S. And so just riding around neighborhoods with my friends on bicycles, like just having free reign roaming, which is something that kids can't, at least in America, kids don't do as much. There's just less. The world's just different. But yeah.
Oh yeah, lovely. Okay, if you were to devote the rest of your life to philanthropy, what cause would you choose?
There's a lot of things that I care about. One of them is protections of people against technology, and so which is one of the things I'm really focusing a lot on now. Which is what I can see all the amazing positive things, but there's all these unintended consequences, and so I care a lot about various technologies. The metaverse being one of the bigger ones, but also artificial intelligence itself. I spend a lot of time on the potential negative dangers for humanity, and so that's probably the thing I would continue to focus a lot on.
What is a lesson that took you a long time to learn?
So I have founded a number of companies, and I think that one of the things that I learned, which takes a while to learn, is to delegate authority and delegate tasks. It's easy to want to do everything yourself, and it's not efficient, it's not productive, it's not how you get the best people working with. And so I think that, and it's something I think you're just not prepared for, like something school doesn't prepare you for, because you're in school, you're pretty much prepared you have a task, you have to do it yourself. And learning to delegate, and I think is a hard one.
So, Dr. Louis, I'd request you to share your online addresses, emails. How can people reach you?
Sure. So the name of my current company is Unanimous AI, and so I could be reached at Louis, Louis, at unanimous.ai. I'm also on LinkedIn. People can find me on LinkedIn as Louis Rosenberg, and can find me on Twitter as Louis B. Rosenberg. I think that's it.
Yeah, it will be there in the show notes as well.
This was a great interview, great questions, and I definitely encourage people to like, share, and subscribe.
Thank you so much, Dr. Louis. It's an honor to have you. Learned so much, and thank you for the work you're doing, especially protection in context of technology. Even while appreciating fully the power of it, I mean, this is like really amazing.